As a child, you might have been like me and stood at the edge of the swimming pool, gripping the railing with fear. The water looks deep. The instructor's voice sounds calm, but you don't understand buoyancy, physics, or muscle memory. All you knew was if I let go, I might sink. The instructor says, I've got you, trust me. That moment isn't about understanding how swimming works. It's about whether you trust the one holding you. And the distinction between understanding everything and trusting someone enough to step forward matters more than we often admit. Greetings, Patriots. I'm Perry Green, and this is God in America, where we reconnect God and America by telling of His hand in our history. God has never required complete understanding before obedience, only a heart that trusts Him enough to take the next faithful step. I come from a church fellowship that emphasizes knowledge and obedience over grace and faith. According to their theology, you can't do the right thing without properly understanding it. But could God act more graciously than we think? One of the clearest biblical examples appears at Mount Sinai. In Exodus 19, verse 8, after God announces his covenant intentions through Moses, the scripture says, all the people answered together and said, all that the Lord has spoken, we will do. Notice the order. The people committed before the law was fully given, before the details, before the consequences, before they understood what obedience cost. They don't say, explain everything first. They say, we will do. God then gives the law. Then in the doing, they learn. This pattern of obedience preceding full understanding did not stop at Sinai. It appears again at the very birth of America. In 1620, a small group of English settlers found themselves far from home outside the jurisdiction of any established government. Winter was approaching and survival was uncertain. Before they understood how they would govern, farm, defend themselves, or even live together, they signed the Mayflower Compact. In that document, they pledged to form a civil body politic and to submit to laws and officers yet to be created for the general good of the colony. They bound themselves to obedience before the system existed. They did not fully understand what that commitment would demand, but they understood something more important. Order must come before comfort and covenant before clarity. In 1776, the men who signed the Declaration of Independence did not know how they could be free from Great Britain. They trusted divine providence. As a result, they acted before they knew the outcome, with fervent hearts and hearty faith. Like Israel at Sinai, they said, we will do, trusting that understanding would follow obedience. Scripture repeatedly confirms this pattern. Paul writes in Ephesians 2, verses 8 and 9, that salvation is by grace through faith, not intellectual achievement. In Romans 10, verse 9, salvation rests on believing in the heart and confessing Christ, not comprehending every doctrine. God himself reminds us in Isaiah 55, verses 8 and 9, that his thoughts and ways exceed ours. If full understanding were required before obedience or salvation, no covenant, biblical or civil, could ever begin. Jesus follows the same order. He does not say, understand everything, then follow me. He simply says, follow me. The disciples obeyed long before they understood the cross, the resurrection, or the kingdom. Luke tells us plainly that Jesus' words about his suffering were hidden from them at that time, yet they followed anyway. In Acts 8, the Ethiopian official openly admits he does not understand Isaiah. Philip explains Christ, and the man responds in faith. His understanding is partial, but his obedience is immediate. Paul later sums this up in 1 Corinthians 13, verse 12. Now we see in a mirror dimly. That is the normal Christian experience. Modern culture demands certainty before commitment. We're told, understand everything first, resolve every doubt, wait until clarity comes. But God's order has always been different. At Sinai, the people said, we will do, and then they learned. At Plymouth, the settlers pledged obedience, then they built order. In Philadelphia, the Continental Congress exhausted its wisdom and resources and turned to God in faith. In the gospel, sinners trust Christ, then grow in truth. Salvation is not a final exam, it is a covenant response. Obedience does not earn salvation, but saving faith obeys. And in obedience, God teaches. As we close, let me encourage you to identify one area where you've been waiting for perfect clarity before obeying what God has already clearly stated in His Word. Whether it's forgiving someone, beginning a conversation about Christ, or praying for a difficult situation, choose one act of faithful obedience today. Let your actions declare, Lord, I trust you, and allow understanding to grow as you walk with Him. Well, thanks for being with us today. Until next time, let's keep the light of faithful obedience burning.